Talking about this and they just roll.
All right then. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Expat Files. My name is Tay Nix, and today I have a really special guest, a really great guy that I got a chance to meet a couple years back. I was aware of him and aware of his really excellent newsletter. This is, in my opinion, the single best investment newsletter that everybody should be getting. And there'll be a link below the video here that allows you to sign up for Capitalist Exploits Insider, the appropriately named and very proudly capitalist exploits. And my guest today is the great Chris Macintosh. This is a guy who, quite frankly, he should be running he knows more about getting offshore and doing a lot of the stuff that I also do than I do, and has done more of it than I have. But that's exactly why he's such a great guest. But Chris has got so much to share on so many fronts that we're just going to go ahead and dive in and actually pick up where our conversation was before I started the recording here. Chris, you and I were just sort of jabbing about the foundational kind of problem that people are up against now that the world has changed, and certainly you saw it coming. I mean, you've set your life up a certain way, and the problem being, it's something like, if you're a regular business owner, somebody who's making good money, got a family, you're in North America or New Zealand where you are today, or Europe, right? Or any place, the formerly free countries of the world, let's call them. You just don't know. It seems like there's just an enormous asymmetry of people who are absolutely flat-footed.
We have amongst our people, if you will, we have an understanding that we tend to get, what's the word? We're acclimatized to certain things. We think a certain way, and you interact with the kind of people that see the world in a similar light to that which you do. And what that does, of course, is that you insulate yourself to some extent from certainly from the problems, from the issues that you see coming, but you also move into this environment where you think that most people should have at least some semblance of the understanding that you have, and then you come across people where you realize that they absolutely don't. And that's what my comment was with respect to our foundational platform. So, for example, there are some people that I've met who, due to their financial circumstances, haven't necessarily traveled, maybe at all, but they see certain things that you and I see as problems, and they see certain solutions to those problems. Certainly it's easier and it's more common for those people who've got some financial resources, who've traveled some. They start seeing the world a little bit differently, right? You go outside of your little microcosm and you go, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Oh, that's, and you speak to different people. And so your worldview expands, and the kind of information that's being poured down your neck or down your throat, should I say, has to become questioned, right? Whatever the narratives might be.
That's fundamentally what traveling does. And inevitably you come across little pockets of, community here, a country there, and you go, wow, this is pretty cool, man. Like this wouldn't be too bad. I could probably hang here. I mean, that's certainly what happened to me. I ended up dropping anchor in a bunch of different places. But I guess part of it that's shocking to me is still the incredible lack of just intellectual curiosity. I mean, I maybe it's genetic, I don't know, but it's like your life is, maybe get 70, as the Bible says, and you're not interested at all to like go see, like the number of Americans who haven't even been to Mexico.
You have a book, and you have a book. It seems absolutely insane to me that you would want only one chapter of the book. And guess what? Most people aren't even interested in a chapter. They're interested in one page. Some people are only interested in one paragraph.
Yep.
And so their ability to actually when you sort of go, hey, yeah, here's the book, their mind explodes, and they can't. It's unfathomable for them to be able to comprehend the book.
I mean, I'm laughing because I consider the reaction, say, from family and friends to go, hey, I'm gonna fly to Dubai and meet with some people, and I'm probably gonna set up a business there. And I mean, I know you've just been to a bunch of places, but I'm gonna set up my bank account there, and if I need to move my company there quickly, I'll make sure I have a new corporation set up there quickly. And it's like, like the reaction is just like, what? Dubai? You're going to Dubai? What are you? What are you? What are you on the run? Are you working for the Russians? Like the whole litany of reaction is
Yeah.
just, it's a different breed, the kind of person who does this. And obviously for my audience, I'm not talking down about anybody here. My point in bringing you guests like Chris is that, look, anybody can do this. The world is not, it's a big place. And you do not need to, we're going to get into this too, Chris, that the situation in North America is that I think North America has the furthest to fall, period. And like a delicate animal that lived, in the Galapagos, and then a new predator gets introduced, right? People in North America have no historical memory of hardship ever at all.
No, it's, and you can see it in the intellectual curiosity or lack thereof. You can also see it in the physical form. When was it? May. I think it was May. I was in Orlando, and I hadn't been to the States for some time. I tend not to go there. There's no real reason for me to go there.
Sure.
And I was attending a conference.
How was it? A good time?
It was a good time. And look, it's Florida, but what was still shocking to me, even though I know it, was the absolute horrendous situation that your average person's body looks like. I mean, just the most obese people, even the people who when you look at them and you go, you know what, on a relative basis, you actually look good. And I could suspect that you kind of look within your cohort of people around you, you look good. And I'm like, if you took that person and you put them in Dubai or something, like people would be like, oh,
they'd be
they'd be like really dorky, like out of shape, So you have, I think, the physical manifestation of what is also in the intellect. I've always said you can't have, the physical body and the mind are connected.
Clearly.
You can't.
It's going to
difficult
reflect
to have the body completely out of shape and yet your mind is intact. That doesn't make sense.
The two-way street that is mind-body connection is, of course, if your body's a mess, right? There's no possible way you're thinking high-level thoughts throughout the day. You're scrolling Facebook. That's the extent of your intellectual curiosity for the day. And so, not to dwell on this and not to beat up on, the sort of 80% of the world that probably doesn't care about a podcast like this, but it is shocking. And obviously we're trying to reach, and I am trying to reach with this effort. I mentioned I got a webinar coming up for a good fellow, Perry Marshall, and his whole planet of people. And Perry's out of Chicago. Good folks. He does a great job, and he's got a very, very big following. They asked me to do a webinar on, how to set up your plan B. And I put a survey out, right? And we're getting some responses like, hey, this is most important. This is least important. Number one answer on the board is, how do we keep our money away from the government? So the dawning, like the light bulb is starting to brighten, I think, or turn on for a lot of people. There's a genuine concern because think of what that means. It's like, it's not just taxation. Like they are coming. They're going to find very, very clever, creative ways to make sure that you pay your patriotic fair share for when the war starts. And it is coming. And I think that's in the air now. I think the big awakening is happening right now.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've talked for years now about the financial background to what is now manifesting itself on a daily basis, and people will see things transpiring and have very little understanding of why those are taking place. So, for example,
let's get into that.
In Ukraine. Look, it's a financial. Everything is driven from the financial side of things first and foremost. We have a pension crisis because there is not enough money. We have a liability crisis across the Western world because we have a socialist environment whereby a lot of things have been promised to the citizenry that cannot be paid.
Delivered. Yep.
It's simple. It's as simple as that. And we'd reached the end of the ability to kick that can down the road. And so now you need a distraction, and you need, so there's a number of things that will take place, or likely to take place, at breakneck speed. You know, it's Lenin who said that there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. These are the weeks.
These are the weeks.
Coming.
Yep.
And you know, so there was something that I saw this morning shared on a chat group, which people might have seen by now, and it's Nigel Farage, who's had his bank accounts shut down and cut off. And so he's basically persona non grata, with an inability to have function like a normal human being.
Yep. Nigel is he's a public figure. He's a media guy, right? What was he in? He was in Parliament or something.
Well, he was a member of Parliament. He was a member of the European Parliament.
Yep. In the UK, and he's been very outspoken, as any honorable person should be.
He was largely the reason behind Brexit. Yep. He was the power that drove Brexit. And so he's
persona non grata. Yeah.
Certainly not loved by the establishment, right? Yeah. And so if they can shut down a person like that, then pray tell, what can they do to you?
Yeah.
Now, so this is happening both on a domestic basis, because what happens when you run out of money is capital controls. That's always been the case. It's been the case in most instances where people are familiar with it in the third world, right? It might have been Zimbabwe or Venezuela or whatever it is. And so I would suggest people go and study that, because the machinations that are utilized there are being rolled out now.
Right now.
And people have an inability to just conceive that would even take place, because they're like, no, we live in a democratic Western society. It's like, look, you need to understand the financial reasons behind the probability of anything, and then you make your decisions accordingly. And so as an asset manager, that's essentially what we're doing. And what we're watching now is this breakdown of Western society, but it's a breakdown of the financial and monetary system that we've enjoyed ever since World War II. That is coming to an end. They know it's coming to an end, the people that have the wealth, and they want to retain that wealth. But at the same time, that requires a lot of things to take place, which are not going to be good for the average citizens.
I was just going to say, you know, it appears on some level, I think some reasonable case could be made, if we're being intellectually honest, that there is a faction hastening the end of the old monetary system. I mean, how else would you term? It's possible that the government was so stupid that they didn't know if they weaponized the dollar against Russia and stole all their reserves, and right, this whole shenanigans going on, that it's possible that they didn't know that was going to send a message to everyone else who is now de-dollarizing at the fastest pace that they can possibly do it. And BRICS has 20 new applicants, all of whom are going to stop using the dollar in trade. It's possible that Washington didn't see that coming, but I doubt it. Somebody knew that would be the outcome. So, you know, you talk about finding the financial reasons why something is going to happen, and that as a money manager, that's exactly what that's like your daily job. And you're one of the best big picture thinkers that I know of. And I know we know, right, in the newsletter world, some of the really best ones worked at the company where I worked. Certainly Bill Bonner is a very good big picture. He's a tremendously entertaining writer. Some of the other guys there are very, very good. Doug, obviously, Casey is a fantastic big picture thinker who can really explain seriously complex topics and make them very easy to understand. These are all good people for listeners to be familiar with. But what talk more about, or just maybe round out briefly, what do you see on the big picture? Like, you write about this a lot. What else is important for people to pay attention to, aside from the important detail that the monetary system is just about tits up, and that you need to be heading for cover, right? You need to be getting your assets into things.
what you need to understand is that the system that has been built, the capitalist socialist system that has been built in the Western world, has reached the end of its lifeline. Okay, that's because those liabilities that have been promised to citizenry at an ever increasing pace are not payable.
Mathematically impossible, right?
Mathematically impossible to be paid off, even via high inflation at this point in time.
Yeah.
Which is why I believe that we're going to go through a debt repudiation of some description. And that is not something that has even happened in the last few hundred years. It's something that it has happened in the past, but it's fairly extraordinary, at least at the scale that it's likely to take place now. Sure,
Right.
we've had debt repudiations at a more localized level with third world countries and things like that, time and time again. Fine.
It's biblical.
But
it's actually
nothing
biblical.
to the extent that is coming or likely to come.
Yep.
So, because everything's just a matter of probabilities, right? So it's dangerous to say, oh, this is exactly what's going to take place, because we don't know. What we do know is the level of probability, and then you need to place your chips accordingly. So that's the first thing people need to understand, is that any countries that have got A, massive liabilities, and two, a socialized structure is highly problematic. Now, you could have a country that has high debt levels, but if it doesn't have that liability level at a social construct, that's a different scenario. And let me give you an example. If in the West, let's say Canada, if in Canada the money runs out for medical services, for aged care, those people will die. Why? Because their kids have never been taught that it's their responsibility to look after them. Sure, some will, they'll come in and they'll do so. But as a societal structure, it has been thoroughly destroyed. There is the people believe and think that the state can and should look after healthcare, education, everything else. Now, if you let's just take any country, say Thailand. In Thailand, that doesn't exist. The family look after the family. Aged grandparents live with their kids in the same household, etc., etc. Medical care, the whole structure is literally looked after much more by the individuals and not by the state. Mm-hmm. And the state has not promised it to them. That's the important part. So if they go through some debt restructuring at that level, at that functional day-to-day manage your life level, there's much lower impact, which also means there's less societal chaos. The societal chaos that comes when you have this belief that X should take place and then it doesn't is profound. The other thing that's important to understand is that the tools that you need in an environment where X goes away and you're now required to do Y, if you've never tested those skills, if you've never developed those skills, you don't know where to start. It's a bit like taking a fat guy into the gym and going, yeah, let's do 300-pound squat deadlifts and do this and do that. And they're going to die.
Yeah, you just blew out both those.
Whereas
yeah.
if you've physically worked out, then you have an ability to go, oh, maybe that's a lot. Maybe I can't for sure do that, but I know how to do the exercise. I know I can get there. So you can work yourself up to it. That's the difference in a place like Thailand. And don't quote me on Thailand. I'm just giving it as a general idea so that people can understand the concept. If you have a breakdown with respect to sovereign debt, if you have a currency crisis, they still look after mum and dad. All right, there's nothing really changes. Those skills have already been developed. So that's important to look at. If you look at the world and you look at how these societal structures are built, look at the debt, the actual financial level, and then look at what the obligations of the government are to the citizenry, because that's going to have a huge impact on your societal chaos or lack thereof on a go-forward basis.
Yeah, and this is why I said, North America is really sort of in the crosshairs of the big category 5 kind of storm, because you're talking about disappointment, and a disappointment where, well, we even have grown accustomed in the United States. I say we, but I benefited from it too, investors. Not just as the state takes care of you, your medical, you're this, you're this, you're this, you're this, making this long list, but also that the Fed's going to bail you out and make sure you're rich at the end of your career and that you have a great retirement and you ride off into the sunset. And all of that's coming to an end. And there's, I even know people in finance and like, even they don't, everything is kind of like, it's okay. Like, it's fine. It's like, well, it's fine until it's not. And I think what I think of when you're describing that situation and juxtaposing it against other countries where, but like shelter, food, water, family, companionship, like the rest of it, Dalio talked about this, the rest of it's kind of an accounting problem. Like that will get sorted out. What you have in the United States and probably Canada too, to some degree, because it's gone completely loopy. I lived in Canada for a while. But what a horrible path that place is on. What you see now is when the disappointment and the anger comes, because it's coming. I mean, there's a lot of angry people in the US already. And you have 400 million weapons, right? That when people reach a point where there's like, but there's nothing left to lose, let's go for it, right? And that's the real danger, right? That's the smoldering little spark, I think, underneath all this is our leadership, and I'm using that term very generously, has put the nation in a really, really tight spot, and it's not clear how we're going to get out of it. It's why I always enjoy hearing from you and checking in. It's like, how bad are things now? Let's hear from, let's hear from Chris and see.
There's also a risk to just kind of looking at all these negatives, but at the end of the day, we have a saying here: shit will get off the pot. Right? You got to do something about it, right?
Exactly.
Run the probabilities, build a plan, and move forward, because we need to be positive in life. I can't be the guy waking up every day going, "Oh, this sucks. Oh, that sucks." No, that's for wimps. Like, do something about it. Build something, make something, right? Even if I'm unsuccessful in that, in the ultimate, I'll go down fighting, and I'll know that I've put everything into it to try and ensure that I can do the best that I can do with my resources possible. And we all need to do that. And so if we focus on that as an element, one of the things that I think is also important for people to understand here is that nothing happens in a vacuum, right? Power abhors a vacuum, and we have a power vacuum taking place as a consequence of this financial structure falling apart, and that is financing the military industrial complex, which itself is also coming under pressure, which is why we're seeing these extreme types of adventures, if you will, taking place. You mentioned the weaponization of the dollar and the SWIFT system and everything else. Part of that could easily, it could easily actually just be complete hubris. And the fact that you're looking around in your toolbox and you're saying, what other tools do we have here? And we know that tool over there is a tool. I wrote an article about this when it took place, and I said, this is a weapon that you get to use once. And it better bloody work, because if it doesn't, you're opening up a can of worms. So, for example, let's take this as a scenario. If we're a mafioso, you and I, right? And we've got a street that we cover, and there's 100 businesses in that street, and we take protection money from them every single week. The way that it's worked in the past is that when some Joey doesn't pay his protection money, we don't just, tap on him and say, hey, brother, we're coming back next week and it better be there. No, we bring out the baseball bat, we break his knees so that he never walks again. Why? Because it's not so much about Joey, it's about the 100 other businesses.
Right.
That when they see that take place, they're like, holy shit, we're not touched. Like, when Tane turns up, we'll hang him.
Yep.
And that's basically the methodology that has been utilized by the Western hegemon ever since World War II. Okay.
Right.
The issue that we have now, and this is where that weaponization of the dollar comes in. The weaponization of the dollar was the baseball bat. It was meant to bring everybody to heel quickly, rapidly, boom, done, right? And guess what? It backfired spectacularly. It backfired spectacularly, partly as a consequence that Russia for the last 20 years has been de-dollarizing their economy and building out their resource base into much, much more than just resources. Anyways, we can go into that for hours on end, and I don't want to spend too long, but the point is it's backfired.
Yep.
And now what you have essentially is we turned up in our street to collect our protection money, and someone told us to get stuffed. And when we brought out the baseball bat, they pulled out a baseball bat, and we got scared and we backed off because we were like, because we are cowards and bullies are always cowards. We backed off. And guess what? Every other business in the street saw that.
They all
and
saw
some
it.
of them now are stepping up saying, we're not playing the game either. If you just watch, there's a clip from the president of Kenya talking to the EU, specifically talking to them, literally talking down to them, telling them, we're not interested in you anymore.
Yep.
Now, that would not have taken place 10 years ago. It's
3 years
taking
ago.
place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's taking place because there's a power vacuum,
Yeah.
and that power vacuum gets filled. This is important for your financial well-being going forward, because there's a massive asymmetry that opens up here, right? Think about how assets are priced globally, how they've been priced for the world that we lived in, right? If you would talk about Canada being nuts, take Canada and think about the value of real estate. I mean, actually, let me go back, because I wrote an article about this. And I talked about Oxford, which is a beautiful little town in England. It's very sophisticated. It's very, gentlemanly, if you will.
Famous, yes.
Famous. And you look at the valuations of the real estate in that. And then I looked at the valuations of places in Turkey. And I think I took Antalya. I like Turkey for a number of reasons. Now, Turkey continues to go through currency crises and devaluations. They're going through one now, okay? But guess what? They've been doing it for so long that the citizenry have figured out how to work. It's like going into the gym. They just go to the gym every day. Oh, it's a currency gym. We're just going to do a lot of push-ups because these idiots are throwing weights at us, and we just got to deal with it.
Yep.
In the Western world, we've never had to do that. They're like, no, I don't go to the gym. It's fine. Yeah, come to Macca's with us. They've got a triple Mac thick shake, and off you go. Right. That's literally the differentiation between those two places on a sort of psychological level. Now you look at the valuations of real estate. Okay. And I wrote all about this, and I showed, for example, the crime rate. And the crime rate in like the UK in general is higher than the crime rate in Turkey. And people will be like, oh, no, that's not possible. And it's like, because you've lived in this little microcosm of a climate. And now you look at the valuations for what you could buy in Oxford. You can buy a fucking mansion.
7-star hotel.
Like with your own gym, you name it. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have this arbitrage, right? That arbitrage is going to get closed as a consequence of a couple of things. One, the country that the Western-led country, which is running the socialized system with massive deficits, is going in one direction. We're seeing it take place, and it's not up. The other is that other destinations, I'm just picking on Turkey, but I could choose a bunch of places, don't even have to do anything. They just need to stand still and do fucking nothing. And as a consequence, they will get capital inflows because everything's relative, okay? I mean, again, I wrote about this because it was at the time when, who was it? Oh, a mate of mine, Cuppy. People might know Harris Kupperman. And Cuppy was traveling around Switzerland, I think, at the time, and I was in Turkey. Anyway, so he was hiking like the Matterhorn and stuff like that. Anyway, so he's staying at a beautiful, nice hotel in Switzerland. Maybe it was the Hilton or something like that. And guess what? They've got the air conditioning. This is midsummer. They got the air conditioning at 27 degrees Celsius because they're no, we can't take it lower because climate hysteria. Okay.
In Switzerland. This is
Switzerland. You're paying like 350 euros a night.
Right.
Something like that. And you're fucking sweating.
And you're begging for AC in Switzerland.
And they've got it cranked up.
Fuck.
So I had that. And then in fact, France was going through the similar thing. And I met a couple at a resort I was staying at, and they had literally fled France because they were just wealthy enough. And they were like, they were sweating in their apartment, and they're going to get fined if they use their air conditioner.
Right.
So they'd come to Turkey because they knew they could get a nice hotel where the air conditioning works.
Right.
And no one's been fined for using the air conditioning.
Yeah.
And so they've done that. But now that's just a short-term trip. That transaction is going to take place at scale at much greater levels where people will physically move.
Yep.
Okay. And I remember taking a photo. So there was I was in the old town in Antalya. I stopped for a bite to eat and a coffee.
I saw it.
And it's hot, and it's like, and
you can
so
sit in the AC outside.
She wheels out this big AC onto the patio
outside
to cool the patio for the patrons, right?
Yeah.
So you just, anyway. Now, this is taking place at an international global scale across multiple countries, right? And you're going to get, as we already are, global capital flows moving. And when those gates shut, because they're bringing them in right now, they're going to shut the gates. Then you have real arbitrage, right? Because people being humans, will find a way out. But I think we're going to see a catastrophic decline in living standards in places that people have just become fat and lazy and accustomed to certain things.
Yep.
And by default, they will eat the bugs because they're going to have no ability. They'll have no wealth. They'll have no capital available to them to do anything other than do what they're told. And there'll be other places that, for whatever reason, choose not to go down that path. We're watching that transpire now. And so you need to be focused on, at the very minimum, trying to have an ability to be able to navigate that world. And you can do it via, your finances to some extent. You can do it via second passports, second residencies.
Right.
If you've got the means, buying additional real estate, things like that. And people will often look at this and go, yeah, but I don't, I had a conversation just recently with a gentleman where it was a similar sort of scenario. And I said to him, look, where I'm sitting right now in New Zealand, it's woke, it's full of, people are nice, but they're fast asleep. They're literally,
it's just an apathy. Yeah.
It's an apathy, and it's very sad. It is very sad to witness, but you just realize that people it's not that they're asleep, it's that they want to be asleep. They just don't even have any desire.
I wrote about this. Yeah, I wrote about this today, thinking about the last several years. And I think the thing that shocked me the most and that hit me the hardest, Chris, was, I grew up and you would hear people say, when I was a child, we all said like, hey, it's a free country, like this attitude of like, bugger off, mind your business. You have your job is not to tell me what to do. Like, who died and made you boss kind of attitude. And since 2020, to just see the unbelievable physical, but also intellectual cowardice of the population. It's like, I always knew, like, most people are not that smart. Like, you don't have to see much of the world and know much about humanity to see. Like, most people, it's like, it's not their goal to be smart, right? It's like very few people are going out and trying to like give themselves a classical education and learn a language. Like, nobody speaks two languages in the US, right? Unless they came to the US speaking another language. It just doesn't happen, right? And so the thing that hit me the hardest was, look how afraid and how these people want to be afraid. And I'm not talking about like the radical libtard. I'm not talking about like people who are like kind of almost like mentally, like not right. I'm talking about people you would expect to have courage to at least disobey, right, what they're being ordered to do, who did none of that. And in fact, like made up reasons to keep sort of like, no, it's just one shot or it's just two shots. I don't know anybody who was happy that they did that. And so that I'm with you on that. Like, it's sad to see what's happening to the Western countries. I think in some ways we really deserve to get our ass kicked. but I'm not cheering for it. The idea of America, and, you know, this comes up over and over again. People saying, yeah, but, you know, what's the answer? Just to run away and do nothing? It's like, well, if you stay, you can't fight, because you can't fight the state. You can't. They have a legal monopoly on force. And it's important not to forget that. If you deny them your person and your stuff, you are fighting for what matters, which is to bring these people to heal and get people to actually think through what it is that they're doing. I mean, in some ways, the currency, the US dollar being dethroned, I know you have thoughts on this, will be one of the greatest things that ever happens, because it's going to force people to get back to a kind of reality where it's like, yeah, you can't print money and start wars and do this shit. You can't do that. It's made the entire population nuts. And so talk for a second. First of all, we mentioned what to do, but what are your top locations? You mentioned Turkey. I know you got a fondness for a country in Central America. Can you talk about, like, where's the best spots for Chris these days?
Yeah,
like,
so
where are you headed?
great question. And you and I have discussed this, you know, offline many times. So if you start with risks and you look at what are the risks that, or some of the most significant risks that we have in the world, you've got the financial side of things, which we discussed, right? And then you've got the physical war, right? Which is the proxy war against Russia taking place now in Eastern Europe. That's being expanded likely into Western Europe. Certainly, there's a lot of things taking place where that's either likely or at least probable to some degree.
Somebody's thinking about it, because this whole charade moving this Wagner group to Belarus.
Yeah.
I mean, if this was a mutant, his head would be off, but they're repositioning troops to Belarus. That's what's happening. So, you know, who knows what's really going on, but I agree. Yeah, it's coming.
So, you know, being in being in Europe is problematic from that respect, right?
Yep.
Just because it's a conflict zone.
All of Europe? Do you like Spain? Do you like Portugal? Do you like
I don't like anything in the EU. I don't like anything in the EU, because the EU is going to collapse. And with that collapse will come a lot of hardship. And a lot of, like, there's just so much that we don't know that can and will transpire. That, look, if I was stuck there, I'd have to make the most of what it is. And I'd pick a particular jurisdiction and I think had the most wherewithal to be able to be better than others. But I don't have to necessarily make that decision, right? I've got the world in front of me. And so as a consequence, it's largely out. And certainly the EU is going to collapse. It's in its early stages of doing so, anyways. So that area is problematic from that respect. Then we've got Southeast Asia, China, and there's a lot of angst taking place there. It seems absolutely nuts that you would see the Western world taking on China in any respect with respect to a Taiwanese issue. And yet I'm watching a lot of things taking place. You know, we had a couple of years back the US giving Australia nuclear-powered submarines, which was against signed treaties with China. You're seeing increasing influence on both Australia and New Zealand with respect to China by being very antagonistic towards them. And one of the, you know, so I've got some very good intel through my networks and clientele and things like that, people in positions of fairly significant power. And I can tell you that from the West, from the US's military standpoint, their strategy is to utilize Australia and New Zealand as a proxy against China, just as they're utilizing Ukraine and Europe as a proxy against Russia. Because there's not the domestic political there's not the domestic political energy to send Americans into war. Like, Americans don't want to know about this stuff, and so they're gonna utilize other measures to do that. So those areas become problematic, and that leads me then into, there's two other jurisdictions in the world, large jurisdictions in the world. One is Africa, and the other is South and Latin America. Africa is problematic from a number of perspectives. There are certain places which are better than others, for sure, but are much more favorable towards Latin and South America.
Amen.
And then within your neck of the woods, Latin America, you've got Mexico. It's too close to the border. It's also already a police state, but it's not something that I would write off entirely, because it's a very large country, and there's many places there that will and will likely be better than others, right? But nevertheless,
certain mentality in Mexico too. I always feel when I'm there, these people get up early, they work hard, families together. Yeah, they listen to the government, but there's pushback in certain respects also. You look at where were the best places during lockdowns. Well, one of them was Riviera Maya, because there's enough ability by certain cartels probably to push back against Mexican governmental decrees, and the entire place stayed open. It was absolutely delightful. It was the best place to ride out. As long as we were there, it was really pleasant. People wearing masks and all the rest, but that's just ignorance. But by and large, there was no actual restrictions. The nightlife was open. You come and go as you please. It was really, really pleasant there. And so that bodes well, I would say. And I know Mexico fairly well. I've been, from one end to the other multiple times by rail and hitchhiking and all the rest. And so, what's happening there, I agree. I think it's a good spot. You're right. It's very, very close to the border. If there's real trouble in North America, how does that not spill over? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, there's good things and probably difficult things, but a lot of good things developing in Mexico too. So, but you had other places too in Latin America that you really favor.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's largely been extrapolations of that which we've seen over the last, 15 or 20 odd years, which is that your middle class North Americans will go to Mexico because it's cheap. It's to some extent, depending on where you are, it is America like. You've still got your Walmarts and your Big Macs and everything else. And,
that's right.
A lot of English is spoken, et cetera. But your wealthy have not done so. They've often gone to Costa Rica. And I think that's more interesting. It's a geopolitically completely insignificant country. It doesn't even have a standing military. Unlike Panama, it's not a geopolitical choke point, which
right.
Panama is.
Yep.
It's one of or has been the safest country within Latin America for a long time now.
Yeah,
and
Switzerland of Central America, really. Yep.
Yeah. And it has, it's stunningly beautiful. It has some of the friendliest, most wonderful people, and highly educated as well. You can look to that, but, very, very high levels of university graduation within the country. So that's a really, really interesting country. It's also got natural resources. I mean, food, water supply, all of that. Great climate.
Very rich place, and it's largely undeveloped. I mean, I know certain areas of it are developed. I haven't been back there in a number of years, but there's large sections of both coasts really that are really kind of right.
Absolutely.
Still very juicy targets for go there and find a spot.
And so I think that's going to continue to be a net beneficiary. I had a conversation just recently when I was coming back from there with a gentleman who was at I had about a 6 hours layover between a domestic flight and an international one, and so I was landed up striking up a conversation with a gentleman who was actually working at the immigration. He was on his way to visit some family in the United States. And so I got to quiz him for at least probably an hour and a half on, his work and what he'd seen and so on and so forth. And what was interesting was that he said to me, basically 2020 was when the place started exploding. North Americans pouring in, seeking refuge from the insanity.
It's on.
And he said that hasn't particularly abated. They're up massively year over year, and they continue to be. And it's not people coming, it's not I'm going to come for a 2-week holiday and go for a surf and do some yoga and everything else. It's people coming, buying, living, looking to move, looking to get residency. And so that's the trickle that will turn into a flood, in my opinion. And there is insufficient supply.
Yep.
For that type of, especially for that type of clientele, because the clientele I'm talking about, especially down sort of Ocean Peninsula way, you know, they're not coming in buying a condo, they're building estates.
They're building 10 acres.
So
yeah. Yep.
So that's of interest to me. And then of course you can move further down south, and you've got Argentina, which is looking kind of interesting, and certainly from the political standpoint right now.
Right.
One way or the other, we're going to have a change of government there that is going to be very different to pretty much anything that we've seen for like 40 odd years.
And BRICS, and BRICS membership. I don't see how they don't get in. It's obviously
and no one's pricing it. Well, the market's begun pricing it. It's been one of our strongest positions since we started buying. It's and we've upped our allocation, but
you almost have to put some money into Argentina, because it just bloody can't get worse, or it can, but probably not at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting thing that I've learned over the years of doing this, Tane, is that your capital starts moving. It starts telling you something's happening before often you've managed to figure out the narrative behind it.
Sure.
I mean, it's funny because I gave the speech in Orlando. So it was October 21. We started positioning into Argentina. The market was telling us something was going on, right? And this was before the whole politics started ramping up, right? Now you look at the market, it's screaming higher, and guess what? Now it looks like Milei is going to win, or his trying to think of the guy's name. It'll come to me. Anyway, there's two candidates. One being Javier Milei, who's basically Ron Paul. Like,
yeah,
that's pretty much him.
We wish him.
And the other guy's kind of like a Reagan, completely different to the Peronists who've been running the fucking place into the ground for years and years. And so it's one of these guys is going to win.
Yeah.
Or maybe a coalition of the two.
Right.
But it's like, this is a radical change. So it's going to become a very interesting place going forward. And the other thing, of course, with Argentina is that Argentina is Europe. It's a European country, largely. Unlike many of the other sort of South and Latin American countries where someone like me with my pasty white skin, I stand out. I could, walk the streets of Buenos Aires and nobody would think I'm not from there. It doesn't matter. So I think it has the benefit of attracting a lot of Europeans. And actually, that just brings me back to something else that I just remembered now, the conversation I had with a gentleman in Costa Rica. He told me that over the last 8 months, an increasing supply and flow of Germans and French. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, of course. For anyone who's like waking up going, okay, I'm living in this hellhole. Look at France at the moment. How many riots are there? I think there's
I don't know. I saw a heat map. I hope that's not true.
Holy shit. And you wouldn't know because the mainstream media is going to black it out. But
completely, yeah.
But when you're looking at your door and you're just watching it, and if you've got any means and resources, you'll be like, hey, this is not what I signed up for.
Hit the bid. Yep.
It's like, hold up a second.
And the Germans too. I just read an article why capital's going to flee Germany. It makes sense. I mean, they're really behind the 8 ball. Your ally, the United States, blew up your prosperity and wants you to be okay with that. And it's like, but individuals are not going to be okay with that. It doesn't matter if I don't see how the government of Germany is supposed to hold things together, but obviously people with the ability to leave are leaving. I can't see how that would play out any other way.
I could give you stories. I mean, when I'm in Dubai, there's a huge amount of Germans now pouring into Dubai for the same reasons. And here's the interesting thing, and I've touched on this many times before. Think about what's happened over the last 20 years. We've had an offshoring of manufacturing and industrial production from the West to the East broadly, okay? If you're running an industrial type business, what is the most difficult component to move? factories
Factory. Yeah.
and large human capital pools.
Yeah.
That's the most difficult thing, all easily. And guess what? That's all been done. So now what are you left with? Now you're left with R&D and human capital. And that R&D and human capital is living in an environment where you've got rioting outside, where you're being told that you can't run your air conditioner. You're going to get fined for it. And so, you know, what you're going to see is an acceleration of what's already taking place, which is that component is going to move, right? And I mean, I had a discussion with a gentleman in Dubai about this, a very, very wealthy German chap who he runs a couple of pharmaceutical companies as well as something else. I can't remember what it was now.
Wow.
But he had already years ago moved his production. He had some in Pakistan, he had some in Caucasus, and then he had something in Romania. And so that had already shifted. And now he just had these like a couple of thousand staffing across Germany. And he was just moving them. He was like, screw this. He moved his family. He was already moved out.
Why would you say?
And he's like, I'm moving all of those across to Dubai because your taxes are zero.
Yeah.
Your cost of living is already lower than it is in Germany.
Instantly.
He's like, it makes no sense why I'd stay there. He's like, why would I stay there? There's no reason whatsoever.
No.
So now you've got a guy who's got, I don't know the size of his business, but it seemed pretty substantial. And he's not the only one. I've got another friend who's just done a similar thing, moving a whole team of people from Liechtenstein out to Dubai. So that's the easiest thing to move. You're just calling your staff, calling a meeting, saying, hey guys, here's the package. You can either take it or you can like leave and stay. That's what it is. And they're going to look around at the workplace and go like, yeah, we're in recession. It's not so good. And they're going to be going home saying, honey, we're moving.
We're going to Costa Rica. Right. We're going to Dubai.
So,
yeah, right.
So these things are, albeit while they're difficult, there's a huge asymmetry there. There's a huge asymmetry.
So what's the timeline? I mean, this is an impossible question, but like how long, what's the countdown? Just give us a scenario to capital controls. Is it this year? Is it next year? I mean, I see this because human beings are like this. Like people wake up to stuff more or less at the same time. I mean, yes, it happens in waves, but there'll be a dawning of like millions of people are going to be like, wait a sec, this is bullshit.
You know what? You don't want people to, like, to some extent, you don't want people to wake up. And I say that because, from a selfish perspective, right?
No,
people listening to this, because once enough people wake up to it, they have to then implement it like rapido. Okay. And so then it's kind of too late. Like because you'll be trapped in like, you may be looking around. Here's the thing, people seek confirmation, right? Because we're social creatures. I've wired my brain a different way. I get scared when people are following, and I know you're of a similar mindset. When you have everybody following, and then you'll feel comfortable now in going, oh yeah, this is coming, and we're now going to take.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, we're okay, right? Yeah, like that whole like, yeah, I'm not leaving.
Yeah, we're all together. Okay, this is the step we need to take. Let's go and do this. By the time that you get a big groundswell of people understanding that, like your opposition, they're seeing that coming. They've got the tools to deal with you. So to answer your question, I don't know, and I don't think that's the right question. The right question is saying, what is the probability? And the probability is, in my book, like close to 100%.
I agree.
In some shape or form, it's going to happen.
It's got to happen. They can't let brains and money leave the country. You can't, right? And the worse things get, obviously, the worse things are going to get. And as people leave, the worse things are going to get. Because when capital and brains leave, it tends not to return, right? So, the border wall with Mexico, which everybody said when it was being built would actually be keeping US people in at some point. I think that's a safe bet. I think that and also, we're living in a time when it's not that hard for people to like Farage, right? It's not hard for some wanker bureaucrat somewhere to hit a button and shut off your access to your accounts. And so this is my message to everybody. when it is too late, it is too late. And so being even a little bit eccentric or feeling a little eccentric and paranoid, you know, if you're watching a podcast like this and you're hearing this, and you're kind of looking around and maybe you're getting confirmation also of some things that you think just don't smell right, getting your money outside the reach of your home government, whether you're US or Canadian or wherever you're from, but especially these two jurisdictions, because again, I think people are so supine for so long now, and that level of apathy and like, but it can't happen here, right? Even as we see things that are completely unprecedented happening over and over again, weaponization of fill in the blank.
How many unprecedented things have we had happen in the last 3 years?
Yeah, you can't count them anymore. Like it's not easy.
I mean, it's just
a mashup. Yep.
Yeah. So the time to be, you know, sanguine about this is long gone. You've got to wake up and smell the roses, and it's not as difficult as people think. That's the other thing.
Yeah, and that is my message to people through this podcast and through all my material is actually, you know, if you look at setting up residency, either buying or getting in a place where you could at least rent in a part of the world, whether it's Mexico or Costa Rica or any place, like take a trip, take some kind of vacation with your family, settle in a place, check it out for a week or 2 weeks, move on if you hate it. But it's not that hard. It's actually kind of fun, right? Once you make the decision to go down that path, what you find is there's this entire adventure that's out there for you. I mean, I went expat in '97. And I'm still on that trip, right? I couldn't find my way home and I didn't want to. And so, you know, buying property overseas, it's not that hard, you know? You're not going to get ripped off like a lot of Americans like, oh, but that's probably dangerous. Like, no, it's actually way easier. You mentioned Costa Rica and I forgot to mention it, but, you know, the medical care there.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's spectacular. And you can get stuff. Here's another thing that most people just don't know. You go to a place like Costa Rica or Panama, or even Mexico, you can get services that you cannot get in North America. Not to mention the fact that you can actually afford to pay them out of pocket, right? Because you're paying like 1/6 or, you know, 1/4, 1/5 of what you would normally pay for that. No insurance hassles, no hidden charges, none of the bullshit that we have to deal with in the US healthcare system, which is worse by the day. And so
that's, sorry to cut in saying
no, your quality of life just improves, right, in ways that you can't imagine when you make the
quality of life is shit if your health is poor, and so that is a driver that will move people, you know, fairly dramatically, and you know, that's going to accelerate. Here's a quick anecdotal example, right? So with all the lockdowns, I was jettisoned from a medical doctor in New Zealand, right? Because I refused to take the required medicine. That's fine. So I'm not going back there. And I needed to have some surgery done, very, very minor surgery. In order to get surgery in New Zealand, you have to be registered first with a doctor, and then that doctor has to then suggest that you go to whoever the practitioner is. You can't just go to the practitioner and say, hey, I need to get this done, and then they get it done. No. You have to go through this procedure.
Is that a rationing thing, or what is that? I mean, it's a control thing, obviously, but for what reason?
So everything's going to be recorded, measured. And so I was like, okay, I went to try and sign up to a doctor. And I literally couldn't find a medical doctor in the country that in the application process would not, they all required me to provide information that I was simply not prepared to provide. Right. Basically, what's your vaccination status?
Yeah, none of your fucking
business.
It's
none of your business.
Right. Yeah, right.
Like, I'll have a personal discussion about things, about whatever, but I don't have to give you my entire medical history. I don't have to give you anything, right? And a requirement to wear masks in their facilities. I'm like, I'm not doing it. I never did it at the start. I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to start now. So these requirements, that's my line in the sand. I'm not going to do it, but I still needed to get surgery done. I literally, with those two things, which I don't think are unreasonable, I could not get any medical treatment done.
No.
And so I jumped on a plane, I went to Dubai, and I had it booked from here. So I landed, and like within a few hours, done, pay them. No one asked me anything. Like, just, so that I'm giving you that example as just because that's going to take place at a continued rate.
Yep.
As they keep cracking down, saying we have to have this about you, we have to have that about you. What's your ESG score, Tane? I'm not sure that we can give you that surgery. Maybe your carbon emissions are too high.
I just went through this. I just went through. I'm enrolling my son in preschool, and I just went through this whole rigmarole yesterday. Like, it took me an hour just to calm down after the whole thing, because the same thing. Like, oh, you got to get a priest. I got to get a priest to say that we don't want to get my son vaccinated for religious grounds. It's like, no, I don't have to get any of that, right? I don't want it, and that's it. I don't have to tell you a reason or anything else. And so I'm with you, I'm with you. It's like, people are going to go where they're treated best. It's not going to take long. The terrible part talking about all of this, Chris, is like, this is the West doing this to people now. We used to piss all over these really shitty countries when I was growing up, goofing on, like the Soviet, like imagine you were born there, but that would really suck. And now you see also how the shoe is going on the other foot. And it's still hard to believe that it's taking place like within our lifetime, that people did think this way in my lifetime. And now you see the institutions have completely jumped the shark and just said, we're actually going to do this to our people too. We're going to have central planning. We're going to have central control. We're going to turn over control to the WHO and all the rest. It's like, I don't think so. I don't think all this is going to work the way you're imagining, but I'm not going down, right? I'm not getting dragged down as everybody doubles down angrily to force you to obey. I'm just not doing it.
Well, look, here's the thing. A lot of those social services like medical care, they're going to go away because the government can't fund them anymore. They're going to have to stand on their own. So the level of care is going to collapse, the volume, and the quality. Quality is already shit.
Quality is shit.
I mean, look, it's terrible.
We go to Mexico for checkups and everything else because I won't do it in Puerto Rico. You just can't do it. You can't put.
No. I mean, I had the same thing. Here I was trying to get dental hygienist to clean my teeth. 6-month wait.
Yeah,
a 6-month wait.
It's the same.
I'm like, this is insane. And then when I do go to them, they give me a very poor service.
That's right.
It costs me a fortune. Again, I just go to Dubai and I get it done, and it's like exceptional service. Done within. I can book it today. I could book it tomorrow. And I could do the same thing in Turkey. I could do the same thing in Mexico. I could do the same thing in Costa Rica, and I can have exceptional service for a fraction of the price, without any hassles and any requirements for me to give them, a stool sample,
anything,
color of my toothbrush, all of this sort of shit. It's right. Why would I put myself through such an extraordinarily, and it's
degrading.
It's embarrassing almost how bad it is. Yeah. And so these things are just, I see them as positives because that's just an accelerant. Right? It's an accelerant. It's just one other element. Like, imagine, if you will, a family that's sitting in Berlin, right? And you're seeing all this shit going on, and then a medical condition comes up, and you can't get it done because the state's like, oh, you got to go on a waiting list, and it's 6 months or whatever it is, and it's a critical issue.
Like, I'll be dead in 6 months. Yeah,
you might be dead, or you can't work without having the procedure done, etc., etc. And you look around and someone tells you, you know what, you can go get that done in Istanbul for at a really, really fantastic private hospital. It's $100 flight. What do you say? And you're like, well, yeah, I've got no other option. Let me do it. And you'll go there and you'll have such a fucking amazing experience. And you'll be like, hold up. I just experienced something that I didn't know about. What else do I not know about?
That's right. That's right.
And so you're seeing that feedback mechanism taking place, because then you tell your friends and all your other friends. Eventually it gets to the point where people are like, oh yeah, you go to Turkey for that. And everyone's comfortable with it. They're fine with it. Oh, you go and you get your teeth done there, or you get your hips or your whatever it is, right? So
a lot of stuff is like that already. It's true. Yeah. In certain circles, obviously not on a mass scale, but I agree with you.
It's growing. It's the network effect.
Yep. My friend, I've kept you a long time. You answered everything I put down here. I'm just looking over stuff. What was the general feel? I know you mentioned Orlando. and George's conference is attracting people who like George, of course. But aside from obese people in Florida, which is kind of a redundancy, what else did you see or sense or feel? I mean, it's always interesting because like somebody who doesn't go to the US very much, and I don't go to the US very much, but I've certainly been more than you. You know, what else did you pick up on? What else did you hear in terms of sound bites?
Yeah,
What else was the talk?
I don't have a lot to talk about because I wasn't there for particularly long. And
Okay,
then I was predominantly in the conference. And so you're secluded and you're in a certain environment.
fair enough.
That being said, the experience that I had going in, I'll give you two scenarios, right? So I flew into San Francisco. Behind the screens, when you go to the passport control, the people are wearing bulletproof vests with guns on their hips. They're just the desk jockey.
They just stamp passports.
Passport.
Right.
These people are under zero risk of being shot, and the requirement for them to have a weapon seems absolutely nuts to me. Like it's only about intimidation.
Yeah,
There's
it's
no
sending
other
a
purpose for
message.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I go through there, and there's the passport control ladies. She's quizzing me. You know, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm here for a conference. Okay. What's the conference? It's an investment conference in Orlando. Why are you going to that? I'm like, well, I'm speaking at it. Oh, are you speaking at it? Who's the company you work for? I'm like, it's my own company. Where's your company? It's in this jurisdiction. She goes, you didn't fly from that jurisdiction. Why are you flying from this jurisdiction?
Wow.
It's just like, I actually just need to get I've got a transfer coming up. I need to fly to Orlando from San Francisco, and you just let me get my bloody bags, would you?
Yeah.
And so and then it wasn't friendly at all. Eventually she lets me through. That was one scenario. Then when I flew down into Costa Rica, come in, and the gentleman behind the counter is like, oh, hola, where you from? I'm trying my Spanish a little bit, it's just fucking awful, but nevertheless.
Good on you.
And he's, how long are you here for? I'm like, yeah, just a few days. Oh, that's terrible. You need to stay longer.
Why don't you stay? Yeah.
Like, he doesn't have a fucking bulletproof vest, no weapons anywhere, no screen.
No,
like,
it's
just it's just so pleasant compared.
Yep. US is a tense, angry place. And
it's a police state. It's a complete police state.
It's a police state. Yep. It's a police state. Well, we can end on a better note than that. So where's your top spots? I think we already covered that, actually. I mean, I know you like Central America. I know you like Dubai. Any place else? You mentioned Argentina. I'm bringing home for us, Chris. Like, oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. Will you just talk for a few minutes? I'm losing the light here. The green narrative. This is very entertaining, right? And I actually really, really enjoy reading your stuff about, the obvious swindle that's being perpetrated. Again, mostly on, the fact that oil is under $70, right? There's a huge disconnect. Another writer, Tom Dyson, was writing yesterday, like oil futures 5 years from now are lower than they are today, right? Like there's such a bizarre disconnect because, we're going to get off oil by 2030. And it's like, anybody who studied this at any length at all, and I'm not even a finance guy, but and I'm not a geophysicist or anything else, or oil guy or anything else, but that this is not going to happen. And so talk to people, talk sense for a second here, and maybe we can end on this note. Why is energy such a good sector right now? What do you see? What don't other people see? And sort of what's coming, right? At least as best, what's the probability of what you see coming?
Yeah, I go back to George Soros's statement, and I hate the guy, but he was
smart,
a very good
though.
trader.
Yeah, he was
very smart.
Good. Yep.
And he had a saying which was, find the premise that is false and bet against it.
That's right.
Okay, so what is the premise? The premise is that we're going to be off oil by, pick your date, 2030, 2050, 2060, whatever it is. Although I don't think that probably matters, because King Charles just put a clock up that said in 6 years' time we're all dead. So,
he's an expert. Yeah.
Yeah, because taking advice from inbreds that are simply
Right.
the descendants of successful thugs always works. But
Right. Yeah, no.
so
And if we
so the
wish hard enough,
disconnect,
right?
so the disconnect is that we're going to replace all of these energy sources with some alternative energy source. The reality is that they don't intend to replace them. They intend to have this destruction while simultaneously having a massive destruction of consumption. They want you in there 15, and it'll be 20 minutes city, then it'll be 15, then it'll be 5. It's sounding incredibly like a prison cell, which is probably like a 1-minute city, right? That's what they want you in. And then they also don't want you consuming meat or anything else. It's going to be bugs. It's going to be synthetic foods, which they can patent and keep profitability going and manage you all through an AI system. That's what they want. That's not going to take place for a whole host of reasons I could give, but don't have the time. So that's and it's being sold to people as a climate crisis and a need to address the climate crisis. And then they roll out all these particular measures. So if we just go back for a second and you look at wood as an energy source, when we transitioned from wood to coal, right? Coal then became the dominant source of energy. And then we transitioned from coal to natural gas, to oil, nuclear, so on and so forth. Did you know that we today consume more wood for energy than we consumed when wood was the predominant energy source?
No kidding.
We also consume more coal today than when coal was the predominant energy source. And the reason behind this is quite simple. We keep adding functionality, right? It's like your phone. Remember the phones you first had? Like, what was the amount of data you could get on that thing, right? Oh, like a
couple of KB, yeah, right.
Couple of KB, right? And I mean, I don't even know what my phone's got now. It's terabytes of something. Anyway, so you keep adding, and that's unlikely to change. It's unlikely to change just because human beings are competitive. So while you've got the green Nazis trying to destroy things, you've got to realize that creates a power vacuum, which comes full circle back to what we talked about at the start. That power vacuum will be filled. It's going to be filled by the people who choose not to go along with this woke energy climate crisis bullshit. And so they will take up the mantle, because you cannot have political sovereignty or power without energy sovereignty and power.
That's, I think,
that's
the very best. Yeah, that's a very best big picture point that you make over and over again is, but there is no, you have no sovereignty unless you have energy sovereignty. You have no power unless you have actual, the ability to power your civilization. The rest doesn't matter, right? You can't even, you got
your army and you're like, charge. And they're like,
yeah,
we're out of diesel, brother.
Yeah, right.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Hang on, I'm still charging. And what are you charging it off of? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, this energy return on energy invested, Adam Rosenzweig talked about this as well at a conference recently that I went to in Panama. The amount of effort expended, energy expended to create this carbon-free world, right, with no emissions. And let's be honest, I mean, I would love to see less pollution in the oceans. I would love to see less pollution just in general. The trend to try to get this done and the recognition that there is a problem is, I think, the correct recognition. However, right, the decision to put governments in charge of doing this and you're going to eat bugs so that we make our goals and all the rest of it.
That's not even their objective. It's a complete false. It's not even their objective. That's not what they're after. Look, the evidence is clear. If you want a less polluted planet, there is one very simple thing you do. You make people rich. That's what you do. Why? Because rich people care about
the environment.
They have when you're starving and you've got, the only thing you can think about is feeding your family that night. You walk down the street, you won't care that there's litter on the street. You don't have the time for that. No. When you're wealthy, like, I'll pay someone to go and clean up my street because I don't want to drive down the street where there's litter. I'm like, no, I want to live in a nice environment. I will pay people to clean up my environment so that I can live in a nice environment. I only do that because I'm wealthy. So you make, and you could look at Singapore, Hong Kong, any country that's actually gone and done that. That is the answer.
Yeah.
But that's not, again, that's not the objective. The objective is about control.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're very long and very happy to be long energy right now. I think that's the point with
There's massive asymmetry in that. There's massive asymmetry in that.
Yeah, and it looks like it's just going to continue. I mean, it looks literally like this is the trade of the decade. How do you think about I forget exactly, how are you positioned on uranium? You like it? You think it's common?
I like the entire energy space, some more than others. And then you can even drive down within the energy sector. You've got multiple different subsectors. So if we take oil, we're extraordinarily bullish on offshore oil providers.
Right.
Than anything else, because it's long cycle. The convexity in that is absolutely extraordinary. They've been beaten.
It's like a coiled spring right now. Yep.
And the day rates on the rigs are now up there like $450 a day. Like it's screaming higher. They're all printing money. Yeah. And the market's not waking up to it. So, it's not just oil, it's like subsectors that you kind of get into. But we like the entire energy space. We're long nuclear, we're long oil, we're long natty gas, a little bit less bullish on natty gas, but we still have positioning in it. Yep. Coal is extraordinarily good, and the valuations in coal mining companies are still stupid cheap.
Yeah, you just wrote about
it. I can't think we go wrong on that, and I might be wrong, obviously, and everything's just a matter of probability, but we're using up more coal. There's less being supplied. And it's like these idiots will still go down and go, oh, we don't have coal. I'm like, how are you going to get steel?
Yeah, exactly.
How are you going to get steel to build the stuff that you want to build? Yeah. Oh no, we'll just somehow, no, steel comes from coke and coal, you morons. Like, how do you?
It's a fundamental ignorance about how civilization works. I mean, that's really it's an arbitrage play on a fundamental ignorance being pushed by a narrative of people who want others to believe things that they just can't possibly be true. Of course, if 5 billion people die, right, then that would change the equation. And so we're all hoping that doesn't happen. I certainly am. I think things are long overdue to get out of control.
Even where you have deaths and that, it's basically going to a war economy. Go and study any war economy. They are never deflationary. They're going to be, so I've been seeing this for years now. We're going to have a stagflationary environment. You're going to have inflation will go up, down, but it's going to be a continuous upward trend. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, that inflation is not going to come as a consequence of growth. It's going to come as a consequence of reduction in supply predominantly.
Okay. And probably a whole hell of a lot of money printing thrown on top.
Yeah, it's because they've got nothing else to throw at it. So they're going to continue to try and solve these problems with issuance of more currency. And it doesn't matter whether they do it in a digital currency or not. It's the same like fundamental.
It will be even more inflationary if they get us into that. Yeah, which probably is coming. My friend, you can no longer see me. But that was a fantastic. We're living in a very interesting time, and that was a very interesting talk. I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate really everything you've done. It connect me with just a wonderful network of people too. Everybody should get Chris's newsletter. Everybody should get everything that Chris and his team do. It's really that good. So you can get a link below and get signed up, because you'll be very happy you did. This is the time you want to be reading from somebody who's doing the kind of work that Chris is doing. So thank you again, my friend. I appreciate it. And all the best to you. Next time you go to Dubai, well, when I go to Dubai, either at the end of the year or early next year, I'll give you a shout in case you're there.
Look forward to it, man.
All right. All the best, buddy. Take care.
Okay. Cheers. Bye.